Two groups who had the weight of the world on their shoulders. Two groups who were destined to save the world from the gods. The four knights of the apocalypse versus their predecessors, the legendary seven deadly sins. Who would win if they were to fight each other? The current chapter of Four Knights of the Apocalypse is chapter 215. So any feats or statements past chapter 215, I would obviously won't know about it, so I won't be taking that into account. Starting off with the four knights, with three of them being somewhat relative to each other, but still having a pecking order, as we visually see Demon Tristan being above Sacred Treasure, plus Potency, plus Magic Imbued Weaponry Percival, as he was not able to do any damage to Baltreep nor his armor. But we see Demon Tristan without any weapon casually rip off Baltreep's arm, making Tristan superior to Percival, even with all of his amps, which Potency, as the name implies, it amps Percival's physical strength. By imbuing his magic into his sacred treasure, then the magic will get multiplied, or more so amplified, and then the magic returns to Percival to amp his physical abilities, plus his 10 times multiplier by imbuing your magic into the weapon. As for Gwen, she was able to damage Percival at what she claims to be using less than 10% of her power, which I do find that unlikely just based on her size at 80% and the size at which she fought Percival. So I'll say, being generous, she was at 10%. We also just don't know how much lower than 10% she was saying. She could have been 9.99% or at 9%. We don't actually know. This would put base Percy with no sacred treasure or any fancy amps at 10% of Gwen's power. But then, if you add on all of the multipliers, such as his Lost Vein level Sacred Treasure, which we can lowball and just say 2 times, which it's not just 2 times, by the way. Anyways, and then add Potency, which you could just give Potency a 2 times amp, making the total multiplier a 40 times. Which would make Percival 4 times stronger than a hypothetical 100% Gwen. But the best feat Gwen has is catching Roldane off guard while she was about to enter combat. Gwen pops her head, but as for Percival, while he isn't using Potency against her nor magic amps, he was able to blitz her 3 times over and do damage to her, which would give him a better feat than what Gwen did, making her the weakest Knight of Prophecy. We also know that when the 4 evils were taken over by Chaos, the 3 Knights of the Apocalypse could have beaten them or fought them equally if they chose their matchups wisely, thanks to Lancelot teaching them this. Which all this would mean is that the Chaos forms isn't as big of an increase compared to their base forms, which makes sense since their bases are already amped by Chaos power. The only one that would have been a trouble for them is Baltreep. Not because he's powerful, but because of his hacks, his magic ability called Division, which rips space and matter, making him neg durability. But with that in mind, we would need to know how strong the base 4 evils are. So we learn from Arthur that he can give Ironside and Pulgard power to contest the seven deadly sins like he gave Worldane and Baltreep by doing away with their humanhood. But is this statement true? Are the four evils equal to the sins? The simple answer is hell no. So listen carefully as I explain to you why I say hell no. We see Worldane take lethal damage from a small wings king that had his magic power sealed, but not only was it sealed to the point where he couldn't control one spirit spear properly, but he was bleeding and was killing himself due to pushing himself past his limit. Yet he had power to break Worldane's perfect cube from the outside, which a perfect cube has power reflection, which would mean you would need to overcome the power that is being reflected to break said perfect cube, and then have enough power to damage the person inside the cube. And the best feat a small wings king, when he had his magic not sealed, he was able to damage base Chandler, who had his magic below 50%, which I put him at best low commandment level. So being generous, Worldane, she would be low commandment level, less than actually. Honestly, I don't even think she would even be commandment level due to how weakened King was and how she had a barrier that had power reflection, yet King was still able to break it and still give her lethal damage, mighty back shots. But anyways, let's just say she's low commandment level for the four evil sakes. But as for Baltreep, he has no AP due to his magic ability, as explained prior, but he is more durable than Worldane by orders of magnitude, as shown due to Percival not being able to do jack to him, but Percival, without his amps besides the sacred treasure, was able to blitz and, do damage to Worldane. But as for Pulgard and Ironside, we already know they are weaker than Baltreep due to Lancelot's statement. So in general, the four evils currently can't contest the sins, and no, Worldane being able to damage Diane doesn't prove anything, as this Diane was already heavily damaged, although there is a art inconsistency with her being not damaged, like no scratches, nada, even though previously she was damaged and bleeding all over. It's the same as how Percy had Dragon Handle when he was supposed to have his sacred treasure and he was using potency within one panel. These art inconsistencies do happen. It's not like the author is going to always be able to remember what happened in the previous chapter, like art style wise, where the damage is, so on and so forth. So you get these inconsistencies sometimes. Unless you think Diane scales to magic sealed small wings king and she is just below commandment level. So at best I would just say that it's just an outlier. And as for Baltreep blitzing Gother, that's also just art inconsistency, as we already see that Gother was further than Baltreep's arm reach multiple times, and yet Baltreep grabbed his throat by just raising his arm, which I guess the plot was against him being in the four evils versus the four knights of the apocalypse fight. So you can't really use that as evidence. Plus, it was a base Gother. It's also worth mentioning that Arthur calls Worldane a fool for trying to fight King, as he was explaining to Ironside and Polgard that the seven deadly sins are just far above human standards. And he used the Worldane as an example of what happens when you try fight the sins. So he kind of contradicts the notion of his four evils being on par with the sins. Now we can talk about the seven deadly sins and the only sin level character in the Four Knights of the Apocalypse group, Lancelot. Before I get started, I want to point out that base Lancelot without any weapon amps is the same strength throughout the entire story, since he already has infinite magic power, so he can't get any stronger without external things such as weapon amps and magic imbued weaponry. So pre-time skip Lancelot and post-time skip Lancelot is still the same strength with their new Sacred Treasure tier weapon and without it. We already know that Lancelot is sin level, but where is he in that pecking order? We already know pre-time skip Lancelot is below base Meliodas, as he got blitzed by Chaos Arthur, even though he was a lot further away than base Meliodas, who charged at Arthur but still reacted to Chaos's attack and didn't even see the need to use his Demon Mark or his Assault mode. But now that Lancelot has a Sacred Treasure tier weapon, he probably would still be below Sacred Treasure tier base Meliodas, due to the fact that even with the Sacred Treasure tier weapon and his ultimate move, Shining Road, Lancelot still wasn't able to beat a portion of Arthur's chaos powers. And that portion of Arthur's powers literally states that this isn't enough to beat me, and then laughs it off. It's also worth noting that when Meliodas was fighting Arthur, Meliodas was holding back due to a plethora of reasoning, as he wanted to save Arthur from chaos, not obliterate him. Which we already know due to previous feats. When Meliodas wants to save someone, his strength and battle sense is drastically nerfed, and then when he wants to kill them, he can do it in like a few blows. So the stats difference is pretty much quite large. It's also worth mentioning that base Arthur, with no weapon amps and out of the blue, he took the damage from the portion of power that Lancelot damaged. Once that portion of power returned back to Arthur, which is why he knew what happened, and yet he still wonders if Lancelot's power has surpassed the sins, which implies it hasn't, otherwise he would have said so. And overall, Arthur consistently views the sins as more of a threat to him than the entirety of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse. He also still has the sins as the benchmark for power. This is important because Lancelot is the strongest of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse and is considered to be the god of war by the Four Evils, and also the strongest warrior Arthur has seen, which none of the sins are warriors, by the way, as they can still fight, but they are no longer holy knights or soldiers or even fighters, but are leaders for their country or realm or town. Lancelot is a soldier because he takes orders from the leader or the King of Leonis. He is also a holy knight, so yes, although the sins can fight, they are no longer fighters slash warriors. It's the same as how every living thing can fight, but not every living thing are considered fighters or warriors. So Arthur calling Lancelot the strongest warrior, it only really applies to holy knights and soldiers. Arthur also has only ever made a run-on sight order for any of the sins, and yet after 2 years and knowing the prophecy has been crumbled temporarily, he is still bamboozled in thinking of a way to deal with the sins. So much so that once he found a way to possibly deal with the 5 sins, he then goes to Leonis, all chaosed up, with Excalibur and with all of the amped 4 evils, saying he was waiting for the day he could deal with the sins, which implies he had no answers to try deal with them till that point in the future. Also, remember, the sins are all split apart most of the time, and yet Arthur never once came down from the heavens to challenge any of them. This would also imply that Gother, although not a physical combatant, he would still be fast enough and durable enough to deal with Arthur, which he relies on speed and durability and also survivability, as we have seen him withstand attacks from the Britannia Demon King and the Supreme Deity like all of the other sins. So he is durable, it's just that he is more durable in 4 Knights of the Apocalypse due to this implication of Arthur's actions. It's also worth mentioning that when Arthur came to Leonis to test the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse strength, Arthur viewed it unwise to have a all-out fight, even though all of his Chaos Knights and 4 evils being right there, and the reason was not because of Lancelot, but because of the presence of the other sins from hundreds of miles away. And even when Arthur, while distracted, was pierced by Lancelot, Arthur was more excited to see Meliodas again. So, although Lancelot is sin level, he isn't stronger than all of the sins, which would now include Merlin, as she is part of the story. And the good thing to note about her is that even in her doll form to hide from Arthur, she is more powerful than Worldane and Gwaine, as she can cast spells without enchantment, which it takes magic power for each word in an enchantment, which would mean that when Merlin damaged the Demon King with a nameless fireball, she lowered her AP. And we see the sheer difference in power compared to Gwaine's lightning attack and with hers. So with all this said, where would Lancelot be ranked? And I would respectively put him around base Bond level, since we do see them spar with both of them being nerfed, yet Bond still having the speed advantage. With both of their nerfs, we see Lancelot being pressed and perception blitzed by Bond. Even when Lancelot first fought Bond, he still got perception blitzed, which also, last I checked, having more weight to you doesn't slow down your perception speed. So Lancelot's perception speed would still be the same without the extra weight. It only really affects your movement speed, or what we would call reaction speed. I don't see why talking about their abilities is needed, since the hacks and abilities is worthless for the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, as the sins just have the same or similar abilities slash hacks, and far more hacks, abilities, combo moves, and overall more experience fighting as a team and as individuals. And since the difference in stats is godly, with 3 of the 4 knights being at best low commandment level, which they aren't even scratching the feet of end of series 7 deadly sins, let alone the current 7 deadly sins. And the only saving grace they have is Sacred Treasure amped Lancelot, who is relatively to a Sacred Treasure Bond, since their bases would be somewhat relative in terms of power. The only difference they have is the speed, which Bond clearly outscales his son when it comes down to speed. And the 7 Deadly Sins have 6 characters that are all sin level compared to 1 sin level character with 3 low commandment punch and kick pretty much merchants. So to put it in perspective, it's like current Bond and 3 random low tier commandments versus the current sins in 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. Do you think a Bond and low tier commandments could win? Let me know down below in the comment section. And I don't really think I need to give a concrete conclusion, as you guys, based on the evidence I've presented and my reasoning as to why I'm not talking about abilities or hacks, you should come to the same conclusion. But without further ado, that's my conclusion of this video. So until next time, peace.